I think it's fun to explain DISC in a way that most folks can easily relate to it. So I will mention to folks, okay, think about the last time you were at an elevator. Have you ever seen someone, okay, get on that elevator and push that door closed? So we might call them to be dominant or a driver. Okay, or if you've seen somebody, they will come in, they hold the door open, and they say, we'll wait for you. Okay, we call those folks more the influence or the interact. Then there's the other wonderful, courteous folks who let others go in first and stand in the corner. Look at that more as the steady folks. And then there are folks who step in the elevator, and they look for that sign that tells them what's the maximum weight, and they look at the group in the elevator, and if it looks like that group might be a little over the weight, the maximum, they step off and take the stairs. So we call them the conscientious group. So kind of just a quick snapshot. When we talked about DISC, we're talking about the behaviors that we can easily observe. And then just a little touch on history for those of you, especially since we've got the majority here trainers, is Dr. Marston, who's actually the gentleman that came up with the DISC model itself in the 1920s. He actually did the prototype of the lie detector, and he actually came up with this amazing book, Emotions of Normal People, which probably isn't very PC today, but in 1928, he was actually one of the first self-help publishers, because back then it was like, oh no, we don't let the public know about this kind of information. But he took the Jung concept, broke it down into 4 basic styles, looking at dominant, influence, steady, and conscientious. And just one more kind of fun slide about anchoring down the behaviors that are related to DISC. We are a lot of folks familiar with good old Tony Robbins, Mr. Rah-Rah Inspirer, Mother Teresa Helping the World, Barbara Walters, Get a Serious Business, and Bill Gates, Computer Guru. And so taking a look at these 4 styles, tell you what, in the chat box, let's look at Tony Robbins. Chat, go ahead and, oh, I gave it away. I touched my touchpad. I gave it to you. Okay, well, you can see Tony Robbins, the I, although I agree with most of you who are saying yes, but he's quite dominant. So yes, I would say he's a combination of definitely a high ID. Okay, in the chat box, go ahead and put Mother Teresa. Would you consider her to be the D, the C, or the S? Correct. We would see Mother Teresa as steady. And then, okay, our Miss Barbara Walters, go ahead in the chat box. We've got left a D or a C. And yeah, she probably has a good quantity of C in her as well, but for majority dominant, and of course our buddy Bill Gates, conscientious. Okay, so just kind of a quick little review about the DISC. So looking at the 3 most popular activities, one that I like to use that gets a lot of positive response is name that style. So here in front of you is Joan, and I'm going to have you then also type in what you think Joan's style is. So we've got Joan here, and she's saying, it's Joan, I'm back, did you miss me? So obviously very spontaneous. She may be saying, I have a great idea for the business. Oh, and did you receive my email about my fantastic vacation? Extremely enthusiastic. She may even just say, you know, I'm calling you just because I'm bored. Yes, folks, you're right. This an I, the interact, the influence. So it's fun to use an activity that has lots of visuals and actually has script dialogue examples. Okay, another one, we've got Mr. Greg here. So go ahead into the chat box, type in what style do you think Mr. Greg is. So Mr. Hall, where is the justification for your request? So Mr. Greg is wanting the analytics. He wants to see the method. He definitely believes in following timelines, logical. Yes, you're absolutely correct. We would say that Greg is the conscientious. Then we're looking at Mike. Whoops, where did poor Michael go? Sorry, Michael, we don't want to miss you. Michael would get on the phone and he would say, hello, Susan, how are you today? And how are those lovely kids? And he would be very friendly. He might say, Joe, if you need help on that report, just let me know. In his office, he might actually also have some family photos. So, right, Michael's style would be more the steady, a little calmer, more soft-spoken, and focused on how the other person is doing. And then we have our friend Susan, who is going to come up. So you can even tell a little bit about Susan's, again, her nonverbal here with the folding of the arms and a look that's saying, let's get down to business. She might get on the phone and say, the market's going down. Oh, by the way, how are you? Or she might call and say, Ryan, Susan, Bob there? Okay, definitely getting to the point. So, yes, we would say that would be Susan is the dominant style. So in, excuse me, in the actual DISC report that I'll show you in a moment, excuse me while I take a sip of tea, I set the activity up by first going over some examples of what does a DISC look like. I wanted to kind of first get you a little bit more engaged, and since there's a high level of DISC knowledge on board, I wanted to give you the challenge first. But I think it's certainly is important when you're doing a training that you're giving, as we call, what's a good job look like, and I'll show you in a moment how this is in the report, the DISC report that I utilize. Quite frankly, I spent 100 hours overhauling it because I wanted it to be a report and a workbook, so trainers didn't have to keep making tons of copies, and that it was a more informative piece, just not a bunch of analytics. So give an example of what a D looks like, and of course, when you're doing the training, I'm sure what you also do is that you're demonstrating. So I would walk up and actually shake someone's hand very firmly. You know, with the I example, you know, I'm definitely giving the thumbs up. With the S, as we see here in a very calm meeting these folks are having, but that I would walk up to someone sitting in the training room and shake their hand, but just nice and firm, but in a friendly manner. And then as example here for a C with nonverbal, when they're presenting, they're going to be behind the podium. So I'm just shaking someone's hand, it's going to be more on the formal. So this first activity, name that style, I do that in the beginning of a training session because this is more about warming folks up, helping them to identify, be aware. I like to refer to training activities as kind of the 3 A's. First, we need to help folks be aware of what do those behaviors look like. Then how do we assess how we would respond, and then the third A is going to be action. So this name that style is an example of the aware. Okay, now we're going to move on to the A, that would be assess, and I like to say using it with case scenarios. And so in the report, what I first cover, and on a PowerPoint, is then the 4 styles. What do these behaviors look like a little bit more specifically? And then looking at, like, okay, once I've identified what someone's style is, what might be some behaviors then I want to actually consider utilizing? And so we see it here for the D, the I, the S, and the C. So in a training program, you first, of course, set them up for success by giving them the information first. Now, I feel what's important in training sessions is that we also, after we've given them information, immediately follow that with an activity. And I encourage that it's an activity that they then need to go turn around and use the information you just gave them. So there are 4 case scenarios that I incorporate in the program, and we're going to take a look at this first one. Is a case study about what is Sam's prominent style, and then how would one respond. And in a minute, again, I'm going to show you in the report where that is located. But here is what you would be asking your participants to actually discover, that Sam is an S style, and that actually we're looking at that they would respond with something, for example, and you might put them in pairs or in groups, that if I was responding to Sam, I would schedule a 15-minute conversation. Whoops. In fact, to tell you what, let me do this. As they say, please hold. I am going to show you where the case scenarios are in the actual report. report. Again, no charge extra for the sound effects. Okay, and let's blow this up a little bit. Okay, so this first case scenario. Shelley, can you see this okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm asking you so somebody can tell me if it's large enough.
It is large.
So, case scenario. So the instructions, as you read each of the following 4 scenarios, you will be introduced to a new hypothetical coworker. You will receive a brief explanation of their communication interactions, providing you with clues so you can determine their natural graph style. Then you'll discover the communication challenge you are being asked to resolve. See prior 2 pages on the communication tips for helpful suggestions. So, for example, here, the first one, Sam is tremendously objective. He brings stability to any work group and is well-disciplined. If Sam says he is going to get something done by a certain time, it is done with quality in mind and done on time, often finished prior to the deadline. He's very dependable, a good listener, and remains calm under pressure. And we don't need these little interruptions from my computer. He is very dependable, a good listener. Yes, Bonnie, we did that. However, when deadlines get moved up, some think he does not display a sense of urgency that is necessary to win. So you just found out that your deadline was moved up 2 weeks. You know that that will have an impact on Sam's deadline too. So first of all, what is Sam's prominent DISC style? By the way, a little tip as being the trainer, that whatever is the first letter of the individual's name, that's what their style is. Okay, so right off the bat, as the trainer, you know that Sam's style is an S. And what we are asking the folks to do is then go back in their actual report and look at, okay, so does Sam's behavior sound like the D? Does it sound more like an I? Does it sound more like an S? And you can have this as, of course, a paired or as a group activity. And yes, they're looking at it and saying, okay, yes, we see that Sam sounds more like the S. So they would write the S. Now, I think it's also important activities. We're not just asking folks to identify what a person's style is, but we want them thinking. Remember, the second A is for assessing. Okay, how am I going to respond? What am I going to do? What's my responsibility? So here are some examples of what they could write down as a part of how they would respond to Sam. Show how your idea minimizes their risk, or show a step-by-step reasoning for a plan. So yes, they may just be actually transferring over, okay, some of those to their worksheet. I'm fine with that. Or over, or they might take a little bit more effort and actually kind of write out, I'd schedule a 15-minute conversation prior to the meeting, By the way, in the Leader's Manual, in the DISC certification, I give you all the PowerPoint slides with the notes below, of course, and it has examples of each of the case scenarios. So I set you up for success. So that's just an example of one of the case studies. I have 4 case studies in the actual report. And now we're going to move on to the email decoder, and I'll show you first where it is again in the report. And then Shelley is going to be actually sharing with you how she's the author of actually the email decoder, and which is wonderful. I have had about 300 folks go through my DISC certification, and I've really tried to structure it so it's a community that supports one another with sharing of ideas. I have a site for graduates, and I give you a password, and you have access to over 200 free training resources. So many of the grads have taken the different email decoder that Shelley initially came up with and have customized it, come up with examples. So in the actual report itself, okay, are 4 examples. In the PowerPoint, show you that, and the PowerPoint, by the way, does follow the flow of the report. Irritates me when that doesn't happen. So I make sure that it does. So before the actual email decoder, have a PowerPoint covering a little bit more about what does a DISC look like in terms of what their email would contain, and then a few tips about how one would go about responding. And then it's actually, okay, then going into the email activity. So Shelley, would you share a little background in terms of how you felt there was a need for the email decoder, and maybe share a best practice of how you used it recently?
Yes, thank you, Bonnie. So I mentioned that I work at a university foundation, and so our audience is about 300 employees that span an entire organization, and that includes major fundraisers, and it includes administrative assistants and directors, and we have accountants, and we have people in research and IT and executive offices, human resources. And so our entire organization, from students on up to our CEO, take the DISC assessment within their first week of hire of the foundation. And so as I began to evaluate the value of the workshop, I began to see that most of our communications on the initial level happen through email, internally and externally. And so for that reason, I was able to find a correlation between how we can decode the observations that we make, such as in the elevator exercise. We can make those same observations with emails. And so that's kind of a roundabout way of how that decoding worksheet came about. And so the practical application is I was working with a department about 5 years ago who were having some challenges getting responses to emails that involved meeting deadlines. And the emails reached out to individuals in the university. And so the bottom line was there were very few responses to this very time-consuming and deadline-driven email. And so I met with the group, and we determined, first of all, their style, their writing style, and then we just determined the style of the audience receiving, and realized that these were 2 very different styles, motivated by different things, and wanting to receive information differently than the writers or senders of the email. And so we, in essence, decoded a way where they could still get the information across in the email, but instead speak to the audience and really follow those DISC principles of meeting people at their style, treating people the way they want to be treated. And so, and then taking that principle to the next level and saying, if you know the audience and you know the person, so let's say it's not going out, your email isn't going to 50 people, the email is going to 1 person. And if you happen to know that person and you have emails from them, you can examine their emails and begin to say, gee, this person doesn't say hello, and they don't say please or thank you, and they simply write a message that looks like a telegram. That looks like a pretty direct email. And so I will have more opportunity to reach this person if I write the email based on their style.
Like the one, yeah, I'm showing up a D one right now.
Yes. So that's an example, and so just, you know, that as you look at that email, you can and so the joy of this activity is that as you're explaining the activity and you're showing this up on the screen and you're asking your participants to guess to speculate the style of the person, it becomes a very lighthearted and humorous activity, and employees begin to chuckle and then laugh when they see themselves to say, I write a message like that all the time, or they're sit next to a colleague and say, that's how your messages look, and I never know if you're mad at me because it seems like they're very abrupt. And so it's human nature to want to see ourselves and to see others, and so it becomes very light and they're very receptive, and it's a wonderful learning process when people can relate to something they do all the time, text and email, rather than actually observing someone.
Great, Shelley. And Shelley, this email decoder you've come up with has become definitely the #1. What's powerful is that also immediately after you train, folks can go back to their office, and chances are they have a few emails waiting for them, so they can immediately put it to work.
And that's a great way to follow up. So many trainers of DISC have those concerns about moving forward with a DISC initiative in their organization, Bonnie, and that's a really good point, because you imagine, what do I do after the initial assessment? Everyone gets a link, they take the assessment, they have a debrief, and then it's, so what? So what do I do with it? And the email decoder can even be an activity that is done separate from the initial debrief and becomes part of a second workshop, or it can be something that a manager talks about in a team meeting. And so this is how we keep DISC alive in the organization.
Excellent, Shelley. Thank you. Superb, superb. So Shelley's the email activity is actually in the workbook itself. So the report that comes through with the DISC certification is one that is organized so that a little history about the natural, I really wanted to show you where the activities are. So, okay, so before that first one, I've named that style, and their actual report, here is the, like, what's in it, what's it look like. So in the PowerPoint that you're reviewing with them, again, the PowerPoint follows, and the activities are right there for everybody. And this is a part of their actual report. And you don't have to make copies, you're ready to go, and you got the case scenarios, and then Shelley's excellent email decoder. So what's next is actually next Thursday. I am going to be including activities that you can use when you're doing a training for teams. So I'm going to have it again the same time next Thursday. Also, if you are would like more information about DISC certification, of course, I would love to talk with you about it. And if you are ready to walk on the, as I say, walk on the wild side, okay, then actually, let's do it this way. And it says Rebecca, who has been helping you, by the way. Thank you, Rebecca. I call her Miss Sherlock Holmes. You can go to DISCcert.com, and actually, if you want to know more best practices, just go on the home page, and you will actually see Shelley has a wonderful, thank you, Shelley. Shelley talks about how she implemented DISC in the organization. This is all free for you. Just go to the home page, and you'll see example how Shelley has implemented DISC. There's Melissa with LPL. Anne with Microsoft has actually a webinar about how she uses DISC with teams. So lots of free resources for you right off the bat. And then again, if you are ready to walk on the wild side and check out DISC certification, then please click on DISC certification, check it out. I'm Bonnie Byrne. Thank you for being with us today, and have a marvelous rest of the Thursday. Thanks so much. God bless.
Thank you, Bonnie.
You're welcome. And that is, what a dynamite group. Shelley and Rebecca?
Yeah.
I'm going to sign off, and then Shelley, I'm going to give you a jingle.
Very good. I'll be here.
Okay?
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Talk to you later. I took the attendance.
Oh, perfect. Great.
I'll send it to you.
Perfect. That's great. Great. Excellent group. Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Bye.